Hermeticism is a metaphysical system forming the basis for many esoteric and occult schools of thought, dating back to around the time of ancient Egypt. According to legend, Hermetic ideas first originated with Hermes Trismegistus, whom the Egyptians identified with their god of wisdom. These ideas were said to have been written down in a vast body of literature called the corpus hermeticum. However, much of the literature was lost with the burning of the Library of Alexandria, but luckily, 42 Hermetic texts survived throughout the Dark Ages and into modern times. For many years, historians believed that the texts actually dated back to the 2nd century and not back to ancient Egypt, because the writing style of the manuscripts was in Greek. However, just because the writing style was in Greek does not mean that the ideas originated from Greek thinkers. Rather, in fact, it was likely that the Greek thinkers who had access to the Egyptian manuscripts at the time simply copied from the original Egyptian manuscripts. Additionally, in the ancient world, authorship was thought to concern the origination of the idea put down in a text, rather than the writer of a particular manuscript. With this in mind, it is entirely likely that with the Hellenization of Egypt following the time of Alexander the Great, wisdom teachings passed down from the Egyptian mystery schools were studied and rewritten in newer texts by Greek scholars. However, with the burning of the Library of Alexandria around the same time, much of the written knowledge of Egypt being stored there was lost, but 42 Greek manuscripts of the original Hermeticism material was saved. Much later, in the year 1908, a newer Hermetic document was published called the Campbell, and it contains the Hermeticism material like the 7 Hermetic principles. In this video, I want to briefly go over and explain each of the Hermetic principles to have a clear understanding of what they entail and how they may relate to our current understanding of the universe. The first Hermetic principle is called the principle of mentalism. This principle tells us that all is mind, the universe is mental. This simply means that the only substance that exists is mind, and that what we mistakenly call the physical universe is nothing more than an immaterial construction within a universal mind called God by religion. We will show why this principle is true in a later video, and actually provide a scientific derivation of the principle. However, the ontological implications will be considered. All that would be needed is a physics-based description of consciousness compatible with these facts. Some of these physics-based descriptions include the conscious realism of Donald Hoffman, as well as the larger field of quantum cognition. When combining this with the physics of emergent spacetime, a full scientific account of the principle of mentalism will be demonstrated, revealing spacetime to emerge from consciousness. Once mentalism is understood, the second most important principle of Hermeticism will be derived, and this is the principle of correspondence. The principle of correspondence simply is as above, so below, or alternatively, as within, so without. The principle of correspondence relates to the higher spiritual world and the lower informational construction we call the physical world within the spiritual world. The idea here is that the higher world above corresponds to the lower world below, such that phenomena going on in the spiritual world manifest in patterns in the physical world. To use an analogy, the activity of a computer code in the hard drive corresponds to the activity of a computer game. Thus, the two worlds mirror each other. The as within so without formalization of this principle can be readily understood within the combination of the concept of quantum cognition with the science of emergent spacetime. The next principle is the principle of vibration. It states that nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. So everything we see as a material object is actually the result of these vibrations. And this is not limited to matter and energy, but it even applies to spacetime itself. The next principle is the principle of polarity. It states that everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its polar opposites. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. When we examine the details of this principle, as described in the Campbell, we find that this principle is the byproduct of the principle of mentalism in combination with the principle of vibration. All is mind, and thus what we commonly refer to as physical objects are actually just mental states. Likewise, these mental states change as their accompanying vibration changes. The science behind this principle follows in the science behind the other two principles. Specifically, the science of quantum cognition, which relates conscious states to quantum probability waves, demonstrates a relation between changes in consciousness and changes in vibrational frequency. The next principle is the principle of rhythm. The principle of rhythm states that everything flows out, and in everything has its ties. All things rise and fall. The swing manifests in everything. Here, the principle of rhythm can easily be seen to derive from the principle of vibration. Rhythm, after all, is built directly into vibration. Given that everything is built up from vibrating waves of probability, as quantum mechanics reveals, rhythms will naturally build up at all scales. And given that quantum cognition treats these vibrations as being mental in nature, these rhythmic patterns can be seen in the phenomena of mind as well, and this includes everything from mood swings all the way up to long-term threads of civilizations over periods of time. The next principle is the principle of cause and effect. This principle is a direct consequence of the principle of correspondence. As it says, every cause has its effect, every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. This, of course, is intuitively obvious. However, the sort of cause and effect it is speaking of is not so much the mundane cause and effect of physical determinism. Rather, it is speaking of causes on the planes, inducing effects on other planes, like the spiritual world and physical world affecting each other. It should be noted that the principle of cause and effect also says that chance is but a name for law not recognized. Here we may wonder how this could be compatible with the sort of fundamental indeterminacy seen in nature. However, on closer inspection, the physics of consciousness will be shown to be identical with what is referred to as free will. And this is not so much as an escape from the principle, rather it grounds the principle. All chains of cause and effect must have first causes, and in a mental universe, mind is its first cause. The final principle is the principle of gender. It tells us that gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine parts. Gender manifests on all planes. At first, this principle seems unrelated to the sort of physics described before. However, on closer inspection, it is shown to derive quite naturally from mentalism. Here, gender is not explicitly referred to pure biology. However, biology is but one manifestation of the principle of gender. The principle of gender is more fundamentally related to binary structure that manifests as a direct consequence of the process or generation of creation within the mental universe. If we start only with the mind of the all, or God, we find that this mind must create within itself. What it creates, though, is also a mind. Here, conscious agents that are created from God can be entangled with one another, forming a single mind, or quantum information system greater than the whole. Likewise, they can be disassociated from one another to form smaller conscious agents. And, if the mind of the all wishes to create the process of creation, then creation can be described in this manner. When someone creates, they create what they love to create. A poem, for instance, is not created by someone who dislikes poetry. Thus, the origin of the gender binary can be seen here. A lover initiates the creation from what is loved, and the love receives the love of the lover. These principles of initiating and receiving love are called masculine and feminine respectively by Hermeticism. This forms the basis about many religious beliefs about the relationship between man, woman, and marriage. As will be shown, though, none of this needs to be based on blind faith or religious dogma. Rather, all of this reduces to the hermetic principle of gender, which can be, in turn, be fully described and derived from the physics of consciousness. So now that we have laid out all the hermetic principles, we will be deriving them in this series. The idea is that as the series progresses, these principles and their associated phenomena, built up from one another, will become more and more obvious. And we will go over parallels between physics on one hand and the occult science on the other. It will also become apparent throughout this series that the concepts in this series are firmly supported by established science, yet may also overlap with what many consider to be the supernatural and things that are only discussed in religious circles. However, this series is not about religion. Everything here can be confirmed independently by the viewers and are facts available to all members of all religions, or no religion at all. My hope by the end of this series is that viewers can have an understanding of the great many phenomena previously thought of to be mysterious and incomprehensible, dismissed as superstition, or accepted only as a matter of faith by religious dogma. By placing the entire Hermetic philosophy within a complete scientific framework, it is hoped that its ignorance can be alleviated. It is therefore my goal that viewers will keep an open mind and continue to watch the videos in this series when we derive the Hermetic principles from science and philosophy.